Hello and welcome to our latest Top 10 Kentucky Derby video. PTF here in the bunker along with JK. And we've got big news, people. We've got a new number one. And let me tell you, it's not the number one that I wish it were if we lived in a world different than the one that we actually lived in. Stick around. We're going to go through this top 10 in this video. Let's start off, JK, by talking about the tour de force performance of a horse who's actually out of our top 10 from the last one, because we now know he will not be competing in the Kentucky Derby. I'm speaking of Nysos. This horse ran a hole in the wind out at Santa Anita, a figure that equates to about the time form US figure would be about a 106 on the Beyer speed figure scale. We estimate it right around a 105. Nysos just imperious in victory out by the San Gabriel Mountains.
Yeah, no, he was outstanding, right? It's the kind of horse that you want to see this time of year, the kind of performance you want to see, the one that gets you excited about what is to come. But unfortunately, we know what is to come. Absolutely nothing. Whoever wins the Derby, I predict potentially might not even be favored in the Preakness, depending on what happens with Nysos. If Nysos continues to go on the run that he might go on, we might have a little bit of an anomaly come the third Saturday in May.
The third Saturday in May. Very good. Preakness going to be very, very interesting this year for sure, with the fresh Baffert runner, presumably Nysos in there. If we made a Preakness top 10 video, JK, it would have just Nysos 1 through 10, I would say, based on that. Really, really looking like an exciting horse out there in California. Let's talk about our comment contest. We did have a winner. Nobody picked the winners of both races, but we did want to give props to Kevin, who did come up with Mystik Dan, the bigger price of the long shot winners in the two races we were covering. $50 free bet. And we're going to have another comment contest. Stick around till the end to get to that one right now. Let's get right into this top 10. We've got a bunch of changes, JK, and this horse, Mystik Dan, the first one we're going to talk about, in position number 10, hit a triple-digit Beyer speed figure himself. It was a brilliant ride, and I think the track was in his favor. What do you think, though, of Mystik Dan?
No, it was an outstanding ride. And you mentioned two things when it comes to Mystik Dan, which is why he still stays at number 10. Remember, we don't make this list. Eric DeCoster does. We just kind of report on it. The reason I think that Eric has him still at number 10 is because that he did have a great trip, and it likely was a bias-aided situation where that inside portion of the racetrack was where you want to be. Think about the running on the beach, right? When there's a little bit of moisture in the sand, it's a little bit easier to walk on than when it's drier. It's not that pronounced on a racetrack, but it can be a little bit more subtle than that. So that's the only reason that I think Mystik Dan's that fast performance is still being judged a little bit. Let's see what he does next time, but he definitely is deserving of being in the top 10.
I'll tell you this, JK, I'm enough of a figure player, and you think back to Two Phils last year, had the big figure on synthetic. People wondered how it would translate. Well, it translated pretty well. He nearly won the damn thing. When I see 100 Beyer speed figure this time of year, even despite the circumstances, this is a horse who needs to be on the radar, needs to be in the top 10. Good on Eric for getting him in there. Number 9 is Domestic Product. Very familiar connections here with the Klarovich Chad Brown connection. Domestic Product for a second looked like he might win the whole race the other day in the Holy Bull. I'm happy that he's on the list, because to me, JK, the thing about Domestic Product that's really interesting, big run in an important prep, and looked a little short to me. Looked like a horse who went there to win the race, maybe got tired. First run since the Remsen. I think Domestic Product's a little bit interesting going forward.
Yeah, it could be interesting moving forward, but let's see what happens. Look, the bottom line is that the Holy Bull was a slow race. The only reason that Fierceness is still towards the top of our list is because we know what he has done in the past. I'm a little bit disappointed in the fact that the number was as slow as it was, which does give me a little bit of pause on Domestic Product. Let's see what happens with him moving forward.
Number 8 is Speakeasy. Folks will remember the maiden special weight last year on the Pegasus Day undercard produced the Derby winner in Mage. Well, Speakeasy in that race this year ran a figure higher than Mage did, 100 on the Beyer scale. The Beyer team does not give 100s away lightly. Speakeasy was not bet on this debut, and then won like a 4 to 5 shot. Very, very impressive. How seriously are you taking this one moving forward?
Very serious. I think a lot of times when you see these horses that aren't bet first time out for Todd Pletcher going around one turn, it's because of one of two things. One, the world doesn't think they're ready by well-publicized works in the morning, or they think they want more ground. And the fact that Speakeasy ran a triple digit buyer with one of those two things likely being true, I think he's a very exciting horse and one that I wouldn't argue with anyone if he was higher on their list.
Number 7 is Hades. This is the horse with a bold ride that got the job done in the Holy Bull. You had mentioned this horse as a potential upsetter. Don't know, we're not red boarding here. You were team Fierceness heading in, though you did mention Hades as the interesting alternative. You liked him a little bit going into the race. What do you think of him coming out of the Holy Bull?
Yeah, look, like I said, it's a slow race, right? The only reason that I still have a little spot for Fierceness is because of what he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, which we'll talk about. I'll say this. Yes, I did not pick Hades, but I did say that if there was any other horse that was going to beat him, it was going to be him. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to check out our preview videos that we'll be doing throughout this Kentucky Derby prep season. But yeah, look, it was a slow race, right? So he's going to have to prove it to me. He did sort of pass the two-turn test. I don't know if he necessarily did because the figure was so slow, but he did do his thing a little bit. We'll see what happens with him moving forward, but nothing to get too excited about with that slow number.
Number 6, Track Phantom. Nothing has changed since the last list. Still deserves a spot in the top 10.
No, absolutely. A horse that's undefeated around 2 turns, trained by a Hall of Famer in Steve Asmussen. What's wrong with that?
Number 5, Timberlake. This is a horse that I know you've had an affinity for right from the very beginning.
Well, the bottom line is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a fast race, and I'm never going to be convinced otherwise. I believe in speed figures. So when horses like Fierceness, Locked, Timberlake, those types of horses, I believe that they have the talent that it takes. So what I'm hopeful that's going to happen is that Timberlake will show up and when he finally does run a race that I think represents what that Breeders' Cup Juvenile was. And that's why I'm kind of holding out hope for him.
I think we can probably breeze through spots number 4, Sierra Leone, and number 3, Dornoch, because these are horses whose status in the race has elevated simply by staying in the barn based on the chaos we've seen since we did our last top 10 video. Anything to drill down on with either of those runners?
Yeah, it's one of those situations like in golf, right? Like they're in the clubhouse, but someone's out there hitting bogeys, so they kind of move up the leaderboard. Look, for me, it's those two horses. I'm not a Remsen guy. I just don't believe the Remsen is the race that leads to Kentucky Derby winners. So let's see what happens with those two. We'll know more after they run. There's no reason to continue to focus on what we don't know about them.
Domestic Product may want a word about that Remsen comment, JK. We shall see going forward. Number 2, this was our old number 1, Fierceness. I mean, what can you say? This was a very, very disappointing effort. The horse traveled like a dream, and it came time to ask the question. He simply had no answers in the Holy Bull. Did you see any excuse for Fierceness?
Yeah, so with Fierceness, he didn't run very well, right? We understand that. He didn't have a perfect trip either, but I will say this about Fierceness. He is the type of horse that he doesn't seem that he can overcome much adversity if he doesn't have things his way. It's also the situation in which maybe he just needed that race. It wasn't the goal. I can imagine that Mike Rapoli and Todd Pletcher and Johnny Velasquez didn't wake up that morning and say, man, if we can just win the Holy Bull, I don't care about anything else. I think they care about the Kentucky Derby. Maybe this was a stepping stone for the 2-year-old champion. We'll see. But it was definitely something to sound the alarms about.
If they had it to do over again, I imagine they would send. The race was very slow early. Maybe he would have been seen to a bit better effect going faster early. I think he certainly would have been seen to better effect being able to get over and get to that rail where Hades was. But these are not good enough excuses for me. I remain very skeptical of Fierceness at this point. The Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of the 3-year-old division currently. Which one are we going to see? Will the real Fierceness please stand up? Maybe we'll see him the next time, wherever that is. Not sure what the plans are. I'm sure they're going to reevaluate after that stinker. Let's get to our new number 1 spot. You made the joke before about the leader in the clubhouse. I think that analogy applies here.
No, look, I mean, Locked is one that we talked about highly last time. Like I said, I'm going to stick to my guns and the fact that the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a fast race. And although Fierceness came back and didn't run particularly well, it's a little bit it's a little bit bothersome, but I do still believe it was a fast race. Locked was in that fast race, and we'll see what he does in the Sam F. Davis. If he runs around there like I believe he should, based off of that performance in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, what he also did in his 2-year-old year, I think Locked could be dangerous for Todd Pletcher.
This video brought to you by viewers like you. Help us out by subscribing, by leaving comments on our videos, by clicking the subscribe button, by telling your horse racing friends to get involved too. We're going to have comment contests throughout the the season. Many more will have money attached to them. What we're going to do with this comment contest, tell us who your top 3 are going forward. We especially want to hear your number 1, but give us the whole top 3 and give a little comment as to why we're going to feature your comment, if you win, on the next video. And we'll get to hear from you, our audience, something we always love to do. JK, great having you. For the audience, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.